The dining table was set beautifully that evening, yet I could already sense the tension crackling in the air like a storm waiting to break. The golden plates gleamed under the warm chandelier light. The scent of freshly cooked biryani and roasted chicken drifted from the kitchen, and still I felt uneasy. It was meant to be a family dinner. Just me, my daughter Sana, her husband Rahil, and his parents. I had taken hours preparing the food, carefully setting the table, and even putting fresh roses in a vase to make the evening welcoming. After all, it had been weeks since I last saw Sana, and my heart was aching for her presence. She used to be my little girl, the one who clung to my hand in crowded bazaars, the one whose laughter filled our tiny home during her childhood. Every wrinkle etched on my face, every sleepless night spent working late, every sacrifice I made, I told myself it was worth it for her future. But lately, she had been distant. The calls were shorter, the visits rarer, and whenever she came, her tone carried a sharpness I didn't recognize. Tonight, I hoped would be different. I hoped to see some flicker of the warmth we once shared. The meal began with small talk. Shabana, my son-in-law's mother, complimented the dishes but with an air of superiority, as if her approval was a rare gift. Rahil boasted about his business, and Sana nodded along, glowing with pride. I listened quietly, smiling at the appropriate moments, my heart swelling just by having my daughter under my roof. But then it happened. I don't even remember what I said before it. Something simple. Perhaps asking Sana if she remembered how I used to cook this same biryani on her birthdays when she was little. I said it with affection, wanting to recall a sweet memory. And Sana, my own blood, my only child, looked me dead in the eyes and said with a sharp, dismissive laugh, "You're not half the woman my mother-in-law is." The words struck like a knife sliding into my chest. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My hand froze on the spoon, my smile faltered, and the room blurred. I looked around, hoping I had misheard. But no. Rahil smirked slightly. Shabana adjusted her dupatta with quiet pride, and Sana, my Sana, didn't even blink. She sat there as if she had said something perfectly normal, as if comparing me unfavorably to another woman was justified. A silence fell over the table, heavy and suffocating. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scraping sound loud in the stillness. My body felt weak, as though the years of labor and sacrifice had suddenly collapsed on my shoulders. I wanted to shout, to demand how she could utter such cruelty, but my voice betrayed me. Instead, I excused myself softly, barely audible, and walked into the kitchen. Inside, away from their stares, my hands trembled as I gripped the counter. The tears I had been holding back spilled freely, hot and unstoppable. How could she? Images flashed in my mind, the nights I went hungry so she could eat, the times I stitched her clothes when I couldn't afford new ones, the extra jobs I took to pay for her education. I remembered the pride I felt when she graduated, the prayers I whispered when she got married. Every hardship had been worth it, because I thought she knew, I thought she loved me. Yet, in front of strangers, her in-laws, she reduced me to nothing. She exalted another woman at my expense. I pressed my hand to my mouth, silencing the sobs so they wouldn't hear. I would not give them that satisfaction. But inside, my heart was bleeding. For the rest of the evening, I moved like a ghost. I cleared plates, served dessert, and smiled when needed. But something inside me had shattered. That single sentence kept echoing in my mind, louder than anything else. "You're not half the woman my mother-in-law is." When they finally left and the door closed behind them, I sank into the sofa, numb. The roses on the table had begun to wilt, their petals drooping sadly. My chest ached, my hands were cold, and I whispered to the empty room, "Was I really not enough for you, Sana?" But deep down I knew. This wasn't just about one cruel remark. It was a reflection of something darker. a growing distance, a shadow of betrayal I had been too blind to admit. And though I didn't know it then, that night would mark the beginning of a transformation in me. The pain would carve me into someone stronger. The humiliation would ignite a fire I didn't know I carried. But for now, all I could do was cry for the daughter I thought I knew. The morning after that dinner felt colder than usual. The sun streamed through my curtains, but it carried no warmth for me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-empty cup of tea that had long gone cold. My chest still ached from the words Sana had thrown at me. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. Maybe she was just trying to impress her in-laws. I had been repeating excuses like a prayer all night, but every time the memory of her voice cut through them like glass. "You're not half the woman my mother-in-law is." Days passed, but Sana didn't call. When she finally did, it wasn't to ask how I was or to check on me. It was to borrow money. "Amy," she said briskly, "Rahil's business deal needs a quick boost. Could you transfer 50,000? It's urgent." I paused, the silence stretching too long. "Sana, I just gave you money last month. I'm not made of gold. Do you even, Amy, please." She cut me off, her tone impatient. "You know my in-laws think we're struggling. I don't want them to look down on us." Her words stung again. Not because she asked for money, but because her concern was never about me. It was about appearances, about how her in-laws saw her. Still, I agreed. I transferred the money, swallowing my pride, telling myself she was my daughter and I could not let her fall. But then it kept happening. Week after week, call after call, the requests grew bolder. More money, more favors. And every time, there was no warmth in her voice, no "Amy, how are you?" just transactions. Worse, whenever I visited their house, I could feel the way Shabana, her mother-in-law, looked at me. With smug superiority, she made subtle remarks, sugar-coated but sharp. "Oh, Amira Jai, you must be tired running that little boutique of yours. Running a business is not for everyone, you know." Or, "Sana has learned so much from me already, how to host properly, how to manage a home. She's blossomed since she came here, hasn't she?" Each word was a knife dressed in velvet. And Sana, my own Sana, would smile and nod as if her mother-in-law had raised her instead of me. One afternoon, I overheard something that broke me further. I had come by with some homemade food, hoping to surprise them. As I stepped into the hall, I froze when I heard Shabana's voice drifting from the living room. "You see, Sana, your mother means well, but she's never lived with dignity like we have. She had to work with her hands, earn money like a man. We are different. We come from respect. That's why Rahil chose you. You belong here." And then Sana's reply, soft, almost ashamed. "I know, Amy. Sometimes I feel embarrassed of her. She doesn't fit in. She'll never understand this life." I nearly dropped the container in my hands. My heart clenched, my breath caught, and for a moment the world spun. Embarrassed, my daughter, the very child I raised with blood and tears, was ashamed of me. I walked away before they could see me, my legs trembling, my face burning with humiliation. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. I had lived my entire life for Sana, and in return, she had allowed others to poison her against me. But somewhere in the wreckage of my heart, something stirred, a flicker of steel buried under years of sacrifice. If Sana wanted to compare me to her mother-in-law, if she wanted to believe I was less, then I would show her who I truly was. Not with anger, not with pleading, but with silence, strength, and a dignity they could never touch. And as that thought settled into me, I realized something important. I was done begging for love that was not freely given. After that day, something in me shifted. The tears didn't come as easily anymore. I had cried enough. The humiliation had burned so deeply that it left no room for weakness. For the first time in years, I asked myself, what about me? I had spent my entire life pouring myself into others, into Sana, into her future, into making sure she never felt the hunger, the loneliness, the desperation I had felt in my youth. But in giving her everything, I had forgotten to keep anything for myself. Not anymore. I returned to my boutique with a new kind of fire in my chest. My little shop, tucked away in a busy street, had always been modest. I sold embroidered clothes, handmade jewelry, small things I crafted with my own hands. Business was steady but unremarkable. Yet now I began to see it differently. I poured my grief into my work. Every stitch, every design carried the strength of my silent anger, the depth of my unspoken pain. I started attending trade fairs, speaking to larger suppliers, even advertising on social media. Slowly, orders increased. Customers admired my craftsmanship, and soon my boutique became a name people whispered with admiration. Amira Jai, your clothes are unique. You put your heart into them, I can feel it. I want you to design for my daughter's wedding. The compliments filled a space in me that had been empty for far too long. For the first time, I wasn't just Sana's mother. I was Amira, the woman, the creator, the business owner. Weeks turned into months. My shop expanded, moving from a single-room space into a proper boutique with glass windows, mannequins dressed in my designs, and a golden nameplate above the door, Amira's Elegance. I hired staff, trained young girls who reminded me of myself when I was struggling, giving them opportunities I once wished someone had given me. In helping them grow, I healed parts of myself too. And as my life bloomed, something ironic began to happen. The same people who once pitied me, who whispered behind my back about the widow who worked like a man, now came to me with respect. They praised my courage, my resilience, my success. Invitations to social gatherings increased, and slowly, I became known in the community not as someone to look down upon, but as someone to admire. Meanwhile, Sana's life was not as picture perfect as she wanted me to believe. Neighbors gossiped quietly. Rahil's business wasn't thriving the way he bragged. His temper was getting shorter, and Shabana, the perfect mother-in-law, had begun to show her true colors, demanding more and more from Sana. Her time, her obedience, her sacrifices. It was almost cruelly poetic. The daughter who once compared me unfavorably was now living the very struggles I had tried to shield her from. But I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I simply carried on, building my world, standing taller with each passing day. One evening, as I locked up my boutique, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass door. My eyes no longer looked tired. My shoulders were no longer bent with defeat. There was grace in my stance, confidence in my gaze. For the first time, I saw not a broken mother, but a whole woman. And in that quiet reflection, I realized this was my revenge. Not the loud, vengeful kind that seeks to destroy others, but the sweet, silent kind where living well, with dignity and strength, was the sharpest response to betrayal. Still, I knew the story wasn't over. Sana would eventually come face with the reality of who I had become. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to speak a single harsh word. My presence alone would be enough. It was a Sunday evening when fate finally arranged the stage for my revenge, though I hadn't planned it that way. I had recently moved into a bigger house, a two-story place with wide windows, a manicured garden, and a gate that bore my name, Amira's residence. It wasn't a palace, but it was mine. Every brick was built from my sweat. Every flower in the garden watered with my tears. That evening, I hosted a small gathering for family, friends, and loyal customers who had supported me on my journey. I laid out a buffet of food catered from the best restaurant in town, decorated the house with warm lights, and filled the air with soft music. My home wasn't just filled with people. It was filled with respect. When the doorbell rang, I turned and froze for just a second. It was Sana. She stood at the door with Rahil and his mother Shabana, all dressed to impress. For a moment, I wondered if she felt the same chill in her bones that I had felt the night she told me I wasn't half the woman her mother-in-law was. Her eyes darted around, taking in the spacious hall, the elegantly dressed guests, the golden glow of the chandelier. I saw the flicker of surprise in her expression, quickly masked by a practiced smile. "Amy," she said softly, her voice carrying hesitation I had never heard before. "What a beautiful home." I welcomed them politely, offering tea and guiding them inside. I didn't let bitterness color my tone. That was part of the revenge grace where they expected resentment. As the evening unfolded, guests surrounded me with praise. "Emirajai, your boutique has changed the game. You're an inspiration for so many women. Your designs are breathtaking. You've truly made a name for yourself." I caught Shabana shifting uncomfortably in her seat, her pride cracking under the weight of others' admiration for me. Rahil, usually arrogant, sat quieter than I'd ever seen him, and Sana, her face told the story words could not. The same daughter who once declared I wasn't half the woman her mother-in-law was now watched me shine in a room full of people who respected me far more than anyone respected her in-laws. Dinner was served. Unlike the night at my old home, there was no awkward silence, no humiliation hanging in the air. Instead, there was laughter, chatter, and warmth, and I was at the center of it. When most of the guests had left, Sana lingered behind. She approached me, her eyes glistening, her hands trembling. "Amy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know what to say. I was wrong. I didn't see you for who you are. I let them turn me against you." Her tears spilled freely, and for a moment I saw my little girl again, the one who once clung to my dupatta, who once called me her hero. I placed my hand gently on hers. My heart, though scarred, still beat for her. "Sana," I said softly but firmly, "love cannot be forced. Respect cannot be demanded. Both must be earned. The day you said I wasn't half the woman your mother-in-law was, I believed you. But now I see I don't need to be compared to anyone. I am more than enough as myself." Her sobs deepened, and she buried her face in my hands, whispering apologies. I stroked her hair, forgiving her not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. That night, as I stood at my doorway watching them leave, I felt no anger, no hunger for more revenge. My triumph had already happened. The sweet revenge wasn't in humiliating them. It was in living so fully, so gracefully, that their cruel words had turned hollow with time. And as the night breeze swept through my garden, I whispered to myself, "They tried to break me, but in the end I became unshakable,